The kind of heat that hung in the air that night made everything feel heavier. The dishes clattered louder, the voices in the dining room sharper, and the scent of seared steaks mixed with the sweetness of expensive cologne clung to Amara's skin like a second layer. It was one of those late summer evenings in Manhattan where the city seemed to vibrate from within, and the Vanderline, the kind of restaurant where billionaires closed backroom deals over Wagyu and 100-year-old brandy, was packed. Amara Carter, 26, moved through the tables like she had 100 nights before. White linen shirt sleeves rolled to her elbows, a small notepad tucked into the pocket of her apron. Her face was calm, neutral, the kind of practiced expression black women in rich white spaces wore like armor. She knew how to smile without inviting conversation, how to disappear while standing right in front of you. Table 17 was hers tonight, a corner booth shielded by a velvet curtain, reserved for guests who didn't want to be seen. She was told only one man would be seated there, Charles Whitmore. The name made the manager stammer when he spoke it, made the maitre d' straighten his tie. Real estate magnate, hedge fund shark, generational wealth kind of rich. A man whose face graced business magazines, who'd made a fortune buying dying neighborhoods and turning them into glass towers. No one from those streets could afford anymore. When he arrived, she barely looked at him. An older white man, maybe mid-60s, silver hair perfectly in place, suit tailored so sharp it could have sliced air. The kind of confidence born of never hearing no. He ordered a double-cut ribeye, rare, with asparagus. A glass of Glenlivet neat. His voice was low, calculated. He ate alone, checked his phone between bites. Barely spoke. It wasn't until the check arrived, slipped into a leather folio, that it happened. Amara approached with the folio in hand, placing it gently on the table. "Whenever you're ready, sir," she said, already half turned to go. But something, a small, unremarkable moment, made her pause. Charles Whitmore reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket, pulled out his wallet, a well-worn leather billfold with soft creases and faded edges. And when he opened it, a photograph slipped halfway out of the pocket inside. She wouldn't have noticed it if the light hadn't caught it just right, a flicker of silver against the matte black of the wallet. A face, familiar and impossibly distant. Her mother. Not a look-alike, not a resemblance. It was her mother. The photo wasn't recent, young, radiant, maybe barely 20. A soft smile, thick curls pinned up, a sundress she'd seen once in a tattered album. Her mother's favorite. Amara felt the blood leave her face. The dining room noise receded into a dull roar. Her breath caught somewhere between her throat and her chest. Whitmore didn't notice. He pulled out a platinum card, slid it into the folio, tucked the wallet away. The photograph vanished back into the leather. Amara's hands trembled at her sides. For a moment, she wasn't a waitress in a 5-star restaurant. She was 8 years old again, sitting cross-legged on her mother's bedroom floor, watching her trace the edge of that same photograph, tears in her eyes. "Some people you don't chase," her mother had whispered once, though she never said who the man was, never told her what it meant. And now, 2 decades later, that man was sitting in front of her, paying for a meal he wouldn't remember. She should have walked away, should have let the city swallow the moment whole. But something cracked open in her. 6 years of dead-end jobs, the eviction notices, the hospital bills her mother left behind, all of it. Amara stepped forward, steadying her voice. "Sir, if you don't mind me asking, where did you get that photo?" Whitmore looked up sharply, startled, as if he'd forgotten there were people in this place. His pale blue eyes met hers, and something flickered there. Recognition. Alarm. Maybe even guilt. "What photo?" he asked, though his voice faltered for the first time. "The one in your wallet," she said, pulse pounding. "The woman. That's my mother." The air between them changed. The hum of the restaurant blurred to nothing. His hand tightened around the folio, his jaw flexed. "I think you're mistaken," he muttered. Amara stood her ground. "I'm not." Whitmore inhaled, steadying himself. glancing to see if anyone was watching. No one was. Privacy was the currency of places like this. "Your mother's name?" he asked quietly. "Naomi Carter," Amara replied, chin lifted. "She died 13 years ago, and that photo, that belonged to her." The room seemed to shrink. Whitmore's face, lined and composed, seemed to crumble in that instant. A man unaccustomed to being confronted, and yet something inside him cracked. "Not here," he said, voice low and rough. "Meet me tomorrow, 9 a.m. Bryant Park." By the fountain. Then without another word, he stood, left a wad of cash so thick it barely fit in the folio, and walked out. Amara stood frozen, heart pounding in her chest. The photograph, her mother, the name she was never supposed to ask about. She knew two things in that moment. One, whatever lay behind that man's eyes, it was connected to everything her mother had been too afraid to tell her. And two, come morning, she would be there. If this story of injustice and transformation moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories that turn pain into power. The subway ride home felt like a fever dream. Every face around Amara a blur of disconnected eyes and tired city stares. She clutched the thick envelope of cash Whitmore had left behind, still warm from his hand, still smelling faintly of leather and something older, wealth too old to ever go stale. The train screeched along the underground rails, but the only sound in Amara's head was the question she hadn't stopped asking herself since that photo fell from his wallet. Why did Charles Whitmore have a picture of my mother? Naomi Carter had been many things: tender, sharp-tongued, endlessly tired. A woman who sang Al Green in the kitchen while making sweet tea and who kept old love letters tucked away in shoeboxes under the bed. But a connection to a man like Whitmore. Unthinkable, impossible, and yet there was no mistake. That was Naomi in the photograph, younger, happier, a version of herself Amara had never known. By the time she reached the third-floor apartment in East Harlem she shared with her Aunt Simone, her hands were numb from gripping the envelope. The building smelled like old paint and frying onions. The sound of a neighbor's TV filtered through the thin walls. Inside, the lights were off, the only illumination coming from a single flickering lamp in the corner. Aunt Simone was waiting. A stout woman with iron-gray hair and eyes the color of storm clouds, Simone Carter had raised Amara after Naomi's sudden death. She was a woman who spoke plainly, whose hands bore the calluses of decades cleaning other people's homes. "You're home late," Simone muttered from the kitchen table, her cigarette burning low in the ashtray. "Everything all right?" Amara's throat tightened. She slid into the chair across from her aunt, the envelope thudding softly between them. "I saw something tonight," she said. "At work." Simone arched a brow, taking a long drag from her cigarette. "Some rich fool stiff you on a tip?" "No," Amara whispered. "I saw a photo of Mom." The cigarette stopped midair. Simone's face paled beneath her deep brown skin, the color draining away like water down a drain. What do you mean, a photo?" Amara swallowed hard, her voice trembling. A man, a customer. He opened his wallet and it was there. The same picture Mom kept on her nightstand. The one with the blue dress, standing by the lake. Simone's hand trembled as she stubbed the cigarette out. Who was the man? Charles Whitmore. Simone's reaction was immediate. Her whole body recoiled, as if struck by something invisible. "No," she muttered. "It can't be." "Jesus, Naomi." "You knew him," Amara accused, voice rising. "I didn't," Simone shot back, but her eyes betrayed her, a deep, old ache. "I only knew what Naomi told me, and that wasn't much." Amara's voice cracked. "Tell me, now." For the first time since Naomi's funeral, Simone's facade broke. She reached for a bottle of cheap whiskey on the table, pouring herself a shot with trembling hands. "Your mother," she began slowly. "She made mistakes when she was young. Big ones. She got mixed up with people she had no business getting close to. Men who promised her the world, then left her to pick up the pieces. Was one of them Whitmore? I don't know for sure. She wouldn't say his name, but she carried that photo everywhere, even after you were born. And when you asked about your father, she'd say, "Some men are ghosts, baby. Better to leave them dead." Amara felt a storm of grief and rage rising in her chest. "I deserve to know who he is." "You deserve peace, Amara. That man, if it is him, he's dangerous. Powerful men like him don't leave proof. And when they do, it costs people like us everything." Amara stood, snatching the envelope off the table. "I'm meeting him tomorrow. I have to know." Simone's voice cracked. "Don't go alone." But Amara was already walking toward her room, heart pounding like a war drum. The past wasn't staying buried. Not anymore. In the dim light of her bedroom, she pulled open the old shoebox under her bed, the one that held scraps of Naomi's life, an old high school diploma, a faded love letter, and there, right at the bottom, was a duplicate of the photo she'd seen that night. She held it up to the moonlight streaming through her window. Same smile, same soft curls. She flipped it over. For the first time, she noticed faint, almost erased writing on the back. "To my forever girl, N. CW." Her knees nearly buckled. It was him. Tomorrow wasn't about a meal check or a forgotten wallet. It was about blood, about legacies stolen, and about a reckoning long overdue. Sleep didn't come for Amara that night. The city hummed outside her window. Taxis grumbling down Lenox Avenue. Somewhere a dog barking. A neighbor's TV spilling muffled laughter into the hall. But inside her room, the silence was thick. Heavy. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the photograph gripped in her hand, its edges worn soft by years of someone else's touch. Her mother's face stared up at her, the smile frozen in time, and behind it, those faint letters. "To my forever girl, N. CW Charles Whitmore." Her whole life she'd built stories in her head about who her father might have been. A traveling musician, a soldier stationed far away, a man with no name but kind eyes. Every possibility had seemed safer than the truth, that it could be a man like Whitmore, a man who bought neighborhoods and closed orphanages and never looked twice at the lives he ruined. A man who sat in restaurants like the Vanderline while girls like Amara poured his drinks and cleared his plates. When the first streaks of dawn bled into the sky, she threw on jeans and a faded bomber jacket, slipped the photo into her pocket, and made her way to the living room. Simone was already there, sitting in the same spot as the night before, as if she hadn't moved. A fresh cigarette smoldered between her fingers, a bottle of whiskey now half empty on the table. "I figured you wouldn't sleep," Simone said, her voice rough. Amara hesitated, leaning in the doorway. "I need you to tell me everything, Auntie." Simone didn't answer right away. The old woman stared at the ashtray, lips pressed tight. "Your mama. She was 19 when she met him. Working nights at that old supper club down on Canal, the one they tore down years ago. She was beautiful, you know. Not just pretty, dangerous beautiful. Men couldn't breathe around her." Amara smiled despite herself. She'd heard about that girl, glimpsed her in photos. The Naomi who wore lipstick like armor, who danced barefoot in living rooms. "He was older," Simone continued. "A regular. Real quiet, always alone. Drove a big black car with out-of-state plates. Naomi told me once she liked the way he looked at her, said it felt like being seen for the first time, but she didn't know who he was. Not at first. And when she did?" Simone's face twisted into something bitter. By then it was too late. She was pregnant, and when she told him, he didn't even blink, said he'd take care of things. She never told me exactly what he meant, but a week later, she was fired, and the landlord tried to evict us. Next thing I know, Naomi's packing a bag, talking about leaving town. Amara's stomach twisted. "She didn't." "No, because of you." A long silence stretched between them. "She told me, whatever that man was, she wasn't going to let him have you. Said she didn't care what it cost her. I never knew what deal they made, but after you were born, she started getting these envelopes. Cash. No return address. Same amount every month. She used it to pay rent, buy formula, get you to school. And then about 13 years ago, right after she died, they stopped. Amara's throat tightened. You think it was him? Simone's eyes glistened, and for the first time in Amara's memory, her aunt looked truly old. I know it was. Amara leaned against the wall, her legs unsteady. Why didn't you tell me? Because what good would it do? Simone snapped, sudden anger in her voice. What was I supposed to say, huh? That your mama's life got ruined by some rich white man who never gave a damn about her? That she died with his secrets eating her alive? I was trying to protect you. The room seemed to contract, grief and fury curling around them both like smoke. I don't want your protection, Amara whispered. I want the truth. And then, quietly, Simone's anger crumbled. She reached across the table, her rough hand covering Amara's. Then get it, baby. But don't walk in there blind. Men like him, they don't confess, they control. Amara gripped her aunt's hand tighter. I'm not afraid of him. Simone nodded. You should be. But Amara only stood, slipping the photograph back into her pocket. I'll be back after I get my answers. And before Simone could stop her, she was out the door, the morning light already spilling across the city like a promise. By the time she reached Bryant Park, her pulse was a war drum in her ears. The fountain shimmered in the early sun, mist rising in the cool air. And there, in the shadow of a marble lion, Charles Whitmore was already waiting, his face unreadable, his wallet nowhere in sight. Charles Whitmore stood alone by the fountain, framed by the early morning light. Dressed in a crisp navy suit, hands in his pockets, he looked like every photo Amara had ever seen of him in Forbes, Business Week, or the society pages. A man who owned entire skylines. But standing here, stripped of boardrooms and entourages, he seemed smaller, older, and, for the first time, uncertain. Amara approached slowly, her heart a dull roar in her chest. The photograph pressed against the inside of her jacket felt like it burned. She noticed how he didn't look up immediately, how the confidence he carried in the restaurant had cracked around the edges. You came, he said, finally raising his gaze. Amara stopped a few feet away. You owe me answers. He studied her face in silence. For a long, heavy moment he didn't speak. And she saw it then, the way his jaw clenched, the tight flicker in his throat, the ghost of something unspoken. She was beautiful, he murmured. Your mother. Amara stiffened. Don't do that. Don't start with sweet words about a woman you discarded like trash. He winced, and a ghost of pain passed over his features. You think I forgot her? I never did. Then why? Why the secrecy? Why the photo in your wallet but no name on my birth certificate? Whitmore exhaled, running a hand through his silver hair. Because when you're born into certain families, Amara, love comes second to legacy. And Naomi, she wasn't someone I was allowed to love. Amara's stomach twisted. Allowed? Are you serious? It was 1984. I was already being groomed to take over my father's companies. The Whitmore name meant land deals, lobbying favors, election campaigns. I was engaged to the governor's daughter. My father made it clear. Men like me didn't build empires by getting attached to black girls from Harlem. The words hit like a blow. And yet you did, Amara spat. You attached yourself long enough to get her pregnant, to ruin her life. I didn't know about you until it was too late, he admitted, his voice cracking. Naomi, she disappeared, took herself off the grid. I looked for her for years. I had men combing half of the city. Then one day, an envelope showed up at my office. No note, just a photograph of a baby. You, and a promise that if I left her alone, you'd both stay safe. Amara's fists clenched. So you bought her silence. I sent money. It was all I could do then without dragging her name into tabloids, destroying both your lives. It was cowardly. I know that now. She shook her head. You think a stack of money fixes abandonment? I didn't come here for absolution, he said quietly. I came because seeing you, I realized how much I failed. Not just Naomi. You. Amara's voice was ice. I don't want your guilt. I want the truth. All of it. Whitmore hesitated, then reached into his jacket pocket. This time not for a wallet, but for a thin manila envelope. He extended it toward her. What's this? She demanded. Records. Papers my father had buried. About you. About other women. Her breath caught. Other women? He nodded, his face grim. My family's wealth wasn't built clean, Amara. They ran charitable trusts, adoption agencies, on the surface. But behind it there were deals. They covered up pregnancies, paid off mothers, sent their children away. There are names in there, women like Naomi, children like you. Amara stared at the envelope, bile rising in her throat. Why give this to me now? Because you deserve to know where you come from, and because if anyone's going to destroy what's left of the Whitmore name, it should be you. The cold clarity of his words left Amara reeling. You think this makes you a good man? She hissed. No, Whitmore answered, voice hollow. I stopped being a good man a long time ago, but I still have power. And maybe, just maybe, you can use it better than I ever did. She snatched the envelope from his hand, her fingers trembling. I don't need your permission, Whitmore. I'll burn your world down without it. His lips twitched into something halfway between a grimace and a smile. I'm counting on it. Without another word, Amara turned and walked away, the envelope tight against her chest, each step feeling heavier than the last. As she crossed the street, her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from Janelle, a journalist friend from college. You won't believe what I just dug up about the Whitmores. Call me. Now. Amara's pulse quickened. It wasn't over. It was just beginning. The streets of Manhattan blurred past Amara as she walked, the envelope clutched in her hand like it might vanish if she let it go. The city's pulse was deafening. The low wail of sirens, the distant honk of horns, footsteps against concrete. She felt none of it. Only the phantom weight of Charles Whitmore's words echoing through her bones. There are names in there. Women like Naomi, children like you. By the time she reached the small cafe in Washington Heights where Janelle worked part-time between freelance assignments, her throat was raw, her hands aching. The bell above the door jingled as she stepped inside. Janelle was already waiting at the corner booth, laptop open, her expression tight and serious. Normally quick with jokes and easy sarcasm, today she looked every bit the journalist she'd fought to become. Sharp, relentless, and dangerous to anyone with something to hide. Amara slid into the booth. You said you found something. Janelle didn't waste time. She turned the laptop around. On the screen was a series of scanned documents, aged adoption papers, legal contracts, and medical records stamped with the faded logo of an organization called the Whitmore Foundation for Women and Children. Amara's stomach dropped. This was one of their front charities, Janelle said grimly. I dug through old court filings, land transfers, tax records. This place wasn't a shelter. It was a holding house. For unwed mothers, mostly Black and Latina girls. They'd keep them there, cover up their pregnancies, then ship their babies out to private adopters, rich families, politicians, CEOs. Half the time, the mothers never even saw their kids. Amara's pulse thundered in her ears. My mother was one of them. Janelle nodded. And she wasn't alone. She scrolled to a spreadsheet of names, first names only, sometimes no more than a description. Light-skinned girl, 17, violin player. Dark-skinned 19, hairdresser, left in 1985. Tears burned at the edges of Amara's eyes. And nobody stopped them? They paid judges, bought off city officials, ran the program for decades under different names. Naomi probably found out too late. When she wouldn't stay quiet, they made sure to erase her from the record. Amara opened the envelope Whitmore had given her. Inside were matching documents, financial ledgers, hush money transactions, internal memos signed by men whose names adorned Manhattan's skyscrapers. And there, On a yellowed birth certificate was her name, Amara Carter, with the father's name listed as CW proof. Her hands shook. "We have to go public with this," Janelle's jaw set. "I already reached out to Malik Shepard." Amara's breath caught. "The civil rights attorney?" "Yeah, and he wants to meet you tonight. Says if this is what it looks like, it could take down half the real estate royalty in New York." For the first time in hours, Amara felt something like steady ground beneath her feet. Not safety, not peace, but momentum. "Good," she said, "because I'm done surviving their lies." Janelle grabbed her hand. "This is dangerous, Amara. These people don't leave witnesses. You sure you're ready for this?" Amara didn't hesitate. "I was born for this." That evening, in a dimly lit office on 145th Street, Malik Shepard reviewed the documents with eyes that had seen a lifetime of injustices and cover-ups. He spoke little, only nodding as each paper crossed his desk. When he reached the birth certificate, his brows lifted. "You realize what this means?" Amara nodded. "It means I'm not just the daughter of a dead waitress. I'm the heir to every secret these bastards buried." She leaned in. "And I want to bury them back." Malik smiled, slow and sharp. "Then let's start digging." As the night stretched long and plans were made, one name kept surfacing. A man still powerful, still protected. Charles Whitmore. And Amara knew, no matter how much he tried to position himself as an ally, there was one more confrontation left. She would face him again. Not as a waitress. Not as an abandoned child. But as the reckoning his family had been running from for generations. The following afternoon, clouds thickened over Manhattan like a curtain pulled tight, heavy and gray. Amara stood before the mirrored glass of Whitmore Global's headquarters, its 30-story reflection swallowing the streets below. The building was a monument to men like Charles Whitmore, monuments built from stolen labor, erased names, and families turned to dust. She clutched the folder tighter in her hand. This time she hadn't come alone. Malik Shepard stood beside her, his calm presence a steady force, and Janelle waited nearby, phone ready to record if necessary. None of them trusted Whitmore, no matter what he'd claimed to offer. Men like him didn't surrender power. They negotiated it, bartered it, twisted it to suit themselves. Inside the lobby, polished marble floors stretched wide beneath gilded chandeliers. The receptionist, a sharp-faced woman with clipped vowels, barely looked up until Malik flashed his credentials. "Tell Charles Whitmore his daughter is here," Amara said flatly. The woman blinked. I'm sorry, I don't—" "He'll understand," Malik cut in, his voice cold as winter pavement. A few tense minutes later, an executive assistant appeared, pale and visibly rattled. She escorted them to a private elevator, which hummed quietly as it rose to the penthouse floor. The air thickened as they climbed. Amara's heart drummed a steady rhythm against her ribs. When the doors opened, Charles Whitmore was already waiting. He stood by a vast window overlooking the city, his hands clasped behind his back, suit immaculate. But something in his posture sagged, a slight curve to his shoulders, a shadow beneath the eyes. He looked like a man bracing for impact. "Close the door," Whitmore said quietly. Malik remained standing just inside the room as Janelle posted up by the door, phone in hand. Amara stepped forward, the envelope heavy in her grasp. "I've seen the records," she said, her voice steady. "I know what your family did to my mother, to those other women. I know what you buried, and you don't get to control this narrative anymore." Whitmore's gaze didn't waver. "I didn't call you here to stop you." "No," she spat, her anger sharp now. "You called me here to buy your absolution, to tidy up your legacy before it crumbles." He winced. "It's already crumbling." "Good." Amara threw the folder onto his desk. Pages spilled out. Ledgers, birth certificates, bribes. Malik added another envelope, containing sworn statements from surviving women who'd been silenced for decades. Names, faces, the ghosts they'd tried to erase. Whitmore looked at the evidence in silence. "It wasn't just about hiding children," Malik said, his voice cool and lethal. It was about controlling bloodlines, about keeping wealth and whiteness pure while using black bodies to clean your floors and nurse your children. Whitmore closed his eyes. I know. You don't know a goddamn thing, Amara snapped. You never sat in a landlord's office begging for an extension on rent, never watched your mother work herself sick because some man bought her silence and left her behind. You don't know what it is to be invisible. A long silence hung between them, and then, softly, Whitmore spoke. You're right. And the truth is, my father taught me to believe our name meant we didn't have to answer for anything, that the people we hurt didn't matter. I carried that. I failed your mother, Amara, and I failed you. He lifted a hand, gesturing toward the papers. I'll testify. Whatever you need. I'll name every man involved. Every judge, every broker, every board member who signed off on those adoptions. Amara's breath hitched. Not for redemption, he added. I don't expect forgiveness. I see what I became, and if I have one decent thing left in me, it's to help burn this down. Malik nodded. You'll do it publicly. Whitmore's lips twitched, a grim smile. Of course. And I'll be the one standing beside you when it happens, Amara said. Not as his daughter, not as a secret, but as the heir to every woman his family had tried to erase. Whitmore exhaled slowly. So be it. Amara turned to leave, her shoulders squared, because the reckoning had begun, and nothing could stop it now. By the end of the week, the truth was no longer a secret. Janelle's exposé broke first. A meticulously sourced, two-part feature headlined, The Whitmore Adoption Scandal. Decades of exploitation hidden in plain sight. It ran front page on digital and print editions of the New York Sentinel, accompanied by grainy photographs of weary young black women from the 1980s, blurred adoption forms, and financial ledgers stamped with Whitmore's family crest. Amara read the first line alone in her room at dawn, the city outside still gray and half asleep. For years, the Whitmore Foundation for Women and Children was hailed as a haven for marginalized young mothers. In reality, it served as a cover for a system of coerced adoptions, illegal payouts, and the systematic erasure of poor black families from the American bloodline. Within hours, news vans camped outside Whitmore Global's headquarters. The mayor's office released a terse statement. The governor demanded a formal investigation. Former board members scattered like startled birds, but the part that mattered most to Amara wasn't the headlines. It was the phone calls. Dozens of them. Voices she'd never heard. Women from Newark, Philly, Atlanta. Survivors who'd seen the article, recognized the names, remembered the clinic on Canal Street, the advisors in gray suits who promised a better life for their babies. Some called crying, some called furious. All of them had stories. One woman, Patrice from Baltimore, had been 17 when she gave birth to a baby boy she never held. She still carried the hospital bracelet in a tin box beneath her bed. Another, Laverne in Queens, named every board member by memory. Names Amara cross-referenced against the Whitmore family documents. They matched. The web stretched further than she imagined. Wealthy families with familiar last names, Marchbanks, Ellison, Culver, tied together by a long, bloody thread. Some of them still seated in city council chairs and corporate boards. Malik Shepard filed a class-action civil suit by Friday afternoon. 52 plaintiffs and counting. Meanwhile, Whitmore himself made a televised statement. Gray-faced and haggard, he read from prepared notes. What began as a misguided attempt by my family to preserve its fortune became a generational crime against women and children who deserved dignity, not erasure. I accept full responsibility for my part in this. I will cooperate with all legal actions moving forward. No settlement, no negotiation, no anonymity. The broadcast reached 10 million viewers in 3 hours. By nightfall, other dominoes tipped. The city comptroller confirmed at least 7 judges had received illegal campaign contributions connected to the foundation. 2 resigned, 1 vanished. Old adoption brokers surfaced, terrified, bargaining their way into immunity deals. And Amara barely slept. Every night she laid awake as the enormity of it settled around her. The faces of those women, of her mother, the weight of bloodlines and birthrights stolen, the ache of too many quiet apologies too late. But she refused to let grief suffocate her. This wasn't about her pain anymore. It was about all of them. On the third day, a woman named Alicia Caldwell arrived at Malik's office with a box of papers she'd kept hidden in her attic since 1992. Medical records, coded adoption slips, private letters between Charles Whitmore's father and the city's adoption board. The final piece. "This is the contract," Alicia whispered, placing the brittle paper on Malik's desk. "The one they made my sister sign before they took her son." Amara recognized the seal. Another Whitmore deal. Another child vanished. Another wound. She looked at Alicia, at the fierce grief in her eyes, and understood this wasn't just history. It was an inheritance, and for the first time in generations they were ready to claim it. The courthouse steps had always belonged to men like Whitmore, to mayors cutting ribbons, to tycoons flaunting victories, to judges handing down sentences that never reached the rich. But on a brisk Thursday morning, for the first time in generations, the people on those steps looked like Amara. Dozens of them, black and brown women, some with graying hair, some with babies in their arms, some with nothing left to lose. The crowd grew by the minute. Survivors, descendants, students with handmade signs that read, "Our mothers matter and no more stolen children." Janelle worked her phone like a conductor, directing news crews, independent live streamers, podcasters, and reporters too long afraid to chase this story. Malik flanked Amara, his tall frame a shield in the swelling crowd. At noon sharp, Amara stepped to the microphones. The city fell still. She held no notes, no practiced speech. Just the voice of a girl whose mother had been erased, now standing in the center of a history built to forget her. "My name is Amara Carter," she began, her voice steady despite the storm inside her chest. "And for 26 years, my mother was a secret this city thought it had buried." A low murmur rippled through the crowd. "I am here today not just for Naomi Carter," she said, holding up a photo of her mother, "but for every woman who was locked away, every child taken, every life rewritten by men who believed their bloodlines mattered more than ours." Applause cracked like thunder. Amara's gaze swept the faces before her, women who'd called late into the night, survivors who'd whispered their stories through tears, some holding tattered photos, some just clutching their own names. "This wasn't charity," she continued. "This was a machine, a system designed to disappear black women while profiting off their grief, and we're here to dismantle it." Another wave of applause. Someone in the back shouted, "Say it again." She did. "We're here to dismantle it." The courthouse doors opened behind them. Whitmore emerged, flanked by federal agents and his attorney. His face was gray, drawn, but this time he didn't look away. Amara stepped down from the podium, closing the space between them. The crowd parted, breath held tight. "This ends today," she told him. He nodded once. "I know." Then, in front of cameras, Amara handed him a sheet of paper, a formal testimony statement, binding him to every fact he'd concealed. "You built your world on our bones," she whispered. "Now you can help bury it." And as the agents escorted him inside, the crowd erupted, not with vengeance, but with something louder, older, a roar that carried centuries of stolen names and severed families, rising in the city's bones. Malik clapped a hand on Amara's shoulder. "You just turned the tide." But she wasn't finished. By nightfall, Malik's office had become command central. Volunteers processed paperwork from new claimants, organizing survivors into legal groups. Janelle's phone buzzed nonstop with interview requests. Nonprofit groups pledged resources, while civil rights leaders from Atlanta to Chicago reached out to join the fight. And amid it all, Amara stood in the middle of the chaos, watching it swell around her. Not lost in it, but finally at its center. Simone called that night. "I saw you on TV." Her aunt's voice crackled through the phone, thick with unspent tears. Your mama would have been so proud. Amara closed her eyes, swallowing the ache in her throat. I'm not stopping, Auntie. Not till every woman's name is spoken. I know, baby, Simone said. I know. Amara hung up and turned back to the crowded room, the walls covered in names written in marker on butcher paper. The list was still growing. So was the army, and the reckoning had only begun. The trial began on a storm-drenched morning in mid-November, the kind of rain that turned city streets into rivers and hung heavy in the air like unfinished prayers. Outside the courthouse, a crowd gathered again. Larger this time, louder. Not just the mothers and their children, but students, labor organizers, clergy, and strangers who'd seen themselves in Amara's story. And there, at the heart of it all, stood Amara. She wore her mother's favorite earrings. Small silver hoops Naomi had once bought at a flea market and worn to every job interview, every church service, every school recital. Amara's reflection in the courthouse glass showed a face older than 26, not in years, but in knowing. Inside, the courtroom overflowed. Journalists packed the gallery. Whitmore sat at the defense table, the sharp angles of his face dulled by the strain of public disgrace. He looked like a man already half erased, a figure whose empire had become its own tombstone. Amara took the stand that morning. Malik's voice guided her through testimony, steady and sure. She spoke of Naomi's life, of long nights in cramped apartments, of whispered warnings, of a photograph clutched like a sacred relic. She told the room how a single wallet, a single name scrawled on a certificate, cracked open a world she hadn't known existed. Her voice never wavered. She read aloud the names of other mothers, Patrice, Laverne, Alicia's sister, girls no one in power had meant to remember. Let these names stand where they once fell, she said. Let them be heard now, because no one let them be heard then. Gasps broke from the gallery. Janelle wept quietly in the back row. Simone gripped a folded tissue so tight it nearly tore. When Malik asked if she recognized the man responsible for orchestrating Naomi's disappearance, Amara's gaze never left Whitmore. I do, she said. Charles Whitmore. The room shuddered with silence. When it was Whitmore's turn to speak, his voice was hoarse, stripped of its usual polish. He confessed to the cover-ups, the payments, the family's secret dealings. He named accomplices. He named men still sitting on city boards, running banks, heading charities. I thought power made me untouchable, he admitted, eyes lowered. I thought money erased blood. I was wrong. By the time the jury returned its verdict, guilty on multiple counts of conspiracy, fraud, and civil rights violations, the city had already begun to change. Half a dozen resignations rippled through the business and political elite. Nonprofits long tied to the Whitmore Foundation crumbled overnight. The Attorney General announced a statewide inquiry into adoption practices dating back 50 years. Amara didn't stay for the sentencing. She left the courthouse to a flood of people waiting in the street, and when someone handed her a megaphone, she didn't hesitate. She raised it to her lips and said, "This is for the ones they tried to forget, for the girls who didn't come home, for the mothers who couldn't fight back. We are here now, and we are not leaving." The crowd erupted. A chant rose, not her name but Naomi's, and behind it the others. Patrice, Alicia's sister, Laverne. Names passed like torches in the rain. Amara felt her voice break, and she let it. Not from grief alone, but from relief. From something fierce and unkillable rising in her chest. This wasn't justice as the court saw it. It was older than that. Blood memory, reckoning, a wound finally named. She looked at the faces around her and knew this city would never again belong solely to men like Charles Whitmore. It belonged to the people who survived them. Months passed, and winter softened into an uneasy spring. Manhattan's skyline, once a fortress of names like Whitmore etched in glass and marble, seemed different now. Subtle at first. A building renamed, a foundation shuttered, headlines chronicling lawsuits, resignations, apologies penned by PR firms too late to matter. But beneath those gestures, something larger moved, a reckoning refusing to be swept aside. Amara Carter stood in front of a modest brick building on 135th Street, one her mother had passed countless times in life, without ever imagining her name might one day crown its entrance. The freshly painted sign read, "The Naomi Carter Center for Justice and Family Restoration." It wasn't the biggest building, not the richest, but it was theirs. Inside, women filled folding chairs arranged in tight circles. Some clutched manila envelopes of birth records recovered from basement archives. Others came with nothing but names and old grief, seeking connection to a past they were finally allowed to claim. A wall along the entrance bore photos now. Naomi, Patrice, Elysia's sister, Laverne, faces the system once erased, now watching over the room like witnesses. Janelle handled the press requests, turning away opportunists and clickbait hunters. Malik worked pro bono cases through an adjoining legal aid office, and every Thursday evening, Amara led a storytelling circle. No cameras, no press, no deals, just voices filling a room built from wreckage. It wasn't perfect. The settlements were slow, some survivors too weary to chase restitution. A few of the men they'd named fled the country, while others lawyered up with the kind of firms that measured justice in billable hours. But still, it stood. The center launched a scholarship fund in Naomi's name for girls pursuing law, journalism, and public health. It opened a helpline for mothers navigating the modern foster system. It became a place where the stolen could speak, and their stories didn't vanish into silence. On the center's opening day, Simone arrived dressed in church clothes, eyes rimmed in red but proud. She pressed a thin envelope into Amara's hand. "I found this while cleaning out the old dresser," she said. "Thought you should have it." Inside was a letter, penned in Naomi's delicate cursive. "If you're reading this, baby girl, it means I didn't get to tell you myself. You are more than the men who tried to control your life. You are mine, in every way that matters. And you are made of fire. Burn their world if you have to. I love you." Amara read it twice, the words staining the inside of her ribs like ink. She stepped outside as dusk settled over the city, the streets humming with life. People moving in currents, holding hands, arguing on corners, chasing cabs. 1,000 tiny revolutions in every block. And for the first time, she didn't feel invisible. She felt claimed. Not by a bloodline, not by a man's name, but by the women who refused to disappear. By her mother, whose voice lingered in old letters in the curve of Amara's chin. By Patrice and Laverne, and every name scrawled on courthouse steps and stone walls. The city had cracked open. It hadn't healed. Not fully, maybe never. But it bled differently now. And in the shadow of the skyline, a new name stood. One that didn't erase its history, but built something from its wreckage. Amara turned toward the lights of the center and whispered to herself, "I am my mother's daughter, and this city will remember us." Because it would. Because it had to.